What do opera houses, English food, Catherine the Great, and cigarette cases have in common? Sacre bleu. Another episode of the Gilded Age. Hey everyone, this is D, Movie Man, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And today, of course, I'm coming to you all with another episode of the Gilded Age, Season 1, Episode 6, Heads Have Rolled for Less. This episode was directed by Salli Richardson-Whitfield and written by Julian Fellows. So we open up this episode at the scene of the tragic railroad accident. But thankfully, Clara Barton and her team are there to assist with any and all medical needs. We also find out that the death toll has risen from 3 to 5. Now, thankfully, there were no women and children involved, but it's a tragedy nonetheless. And as a show of gratitude and goodwill, George decides to donate even more money to Clara Barton and the Red Cross. We also see someone there from the Daily Graphic who was there to take pictures of the train. Mr. Clay figures that Bertha and George should go ahead and take the picture, otherwise people might think they were trying to hide. And I thought it was so awkward when they took that picture. I mean, it's not like they were standing there like, hey everybody, look what happened, But given the circumstances, I would not be comfortable doing that. We also hear from Agnes about the growing war between the old and the new at the Academy of Music. Old New York considers the Academy of Music to be one of the last bastions of standards and decency in this city. In other words, no new people allowed. And no jumped-up opera house is going to change that. History would suggest otherwise. Later, George discovers that the cause of the accident was metal fatigue and a broken axle. He realizes that someone has installed this purposely, and now the public will think that they've cut corners. Thankfully, there's been no real damage as far as the market is concerned. But there's a bigger issue at hand. George has a killer on his payroll, and he needs to make it very clear to everyone that it wasn't him. Next, we see Peggy and Marion having a discussion about the accident, and of course, about Tom. In Peggy's opinion, she found what Tom was saying to Marion a bit worrisome because it doesn't look like he has any real plan in place for the future. They then head over to a committee meeting being held at Mrs. Fane's home. And once more, the dark cloud that is Mrs. Morris has returned. Once she realizes that Bertha has been asked to attend, she is appalled. After all, she is the wife of a murderer who now has more blood on his hands than when he killed her husband. And as I have said plenty of times before, all of this anger is completely misplaced. As I recall, your husband and associates would have had no problem bankrupting George. And I'm pretty sure that had George made the decision that your husband made, I don't think you'd be shedding any tears. Clara then addresses Mrs. Morris and lets her know, listen, I am sorry for your loss and for what you're going through. However, this is not the place for these ridiculous society squabbles. Then Mrs. Morris says that this is not a society squabble because Bertha is not in society. And I was just thinking, she's a lot closer to it than you are right now, given your present circumstances. And that fact is confirmed when Bertha steps into the room, realizes that she is once again the topic of conversation, and then takes her seat to await her impending invitation to the board. But first, a vote. Everyone who wants Mrs. Russell on the board, raise your hand. We see Aurora, Clara, Marion, and another woman raise their hands. Everybody else? Nope. Then Clara stands up and lets everyone know, so you do realize that no one else has done more to assist this cause, correct? And since no one can argue with that, everyone raises their hands. Well, except Mrs. Morris, who was incensed. And again, Claire reinforces that this is not about society foolishness. This is about coming together to bring aid to those who are most in need all over the country. But all Mrs. Morris can see is that she is being jettisoned, while Bertha is being enthroned. And she is no longer willing to sit around and entertain this new member and the new set of values in this group. So long, farewell. Afterwards, Clara speaks to Peggy and expresses her appreciation for the article she wrote, which will undoubtedly encourage others to join her cause. She also asks Marion if she's spoken to Mrs. Chamberlain, and Marion lets her know that she will be calling on her next Thursday. Outside, Marion has her first introduction to injustice when one of the drivers refuses to take both her and Peggy to their destinations. Marion is shocked, but Peggy is mostly unfazed. I mean, this might be new to Marion, but Peggy has lived with this her entire life. Next, we discover that Bertha's societal aspirations are about to hit pay dirt. Aurora informs her that Ward McAllister is very curious about her palace on the avenue, meaning that she is now in a position to entertain him in her own home. But Aurora also warns her that the service must be English, because he uses this to frighten newcomers. So she must absolutely make this a success, because she won't get a second chance. Over at the New York Globe, Peggy discovers that she has hit a very unexpected milestone. She has single-handedly increased the subscriptions of the New York Globe with her article. We also see her speak with her mother and share her good news. However, the conversation eventually turns back to Peggy's father, and only time will tell if they'll ever truly be a family again. Back at the Russells, we see Bertha planning the menu for her upcoming luncheon with Mrs. Bruce, Monsieur Baudin, and Church. Now, the main entree will be French, but she figures she'll add an English flavor to some of the other dishes, just for fun. But she's a little unsure about Church's ability to handle an entire luncheon laid and served in the English manner. And if Church's face is any indication, so is he. But thankfully, Mrs. Bruce convinces Bertha to enlist Bannister and his English services for the luncheon. George updates Bertha with the information about the substandard axles. Bertha says that they must try and control the damage, which George assumes is in reference to the company. No, she's referring to the damage to themselves, socially. This is all very inconvenient, considering that she now has the opportunity for Ward McAllister to attend her luncheon. This is not the response that George was expecting. He says, I think the fact that there are 5 people dead and one of my staff members has blood on his hands is a little more important than where the great Ward McAllister has his luncheon. And as soon as he said that, I was like, uh-oh. Bertha doesn't mean to be insensitive, but this is everything that she's been working for. And she knows that if anyone can help make it happen for her, it's Mr. McAllister. George also doesn't appreciate the fact that Bertha is opening all of Gladys's letters. And he snatches the one that Bertha is reading and goes to take it to Gladys. And then Bertha tells George to please not go soft on her. And George's response, well, no one could accuse you of that. I said, oh, no. No. See, this is how it begins. I'm not happy about that. I've been enjoying George and Bertha's dynamic, and now we see the dynamic that's happening. Priorities are shifting, and yeah, this is not good. After George delivers Gladys her letter, they then have a conversation about Archie Baldwin. And what really frustrates Gladys in this entire situation is that George has done this all for Bertha's sake. She says, you're one of the most successful men in the country. Real estate, steel, copper, coal, oil, and railroads that are the envy of the world. And yet, you can't stand up to your wife? I said, oh my God. What is happening? Like, George is like taking a beating from everybody this episode. Like, I can't deal with it. In Gladys's eyes, she's just an ordinary person who wants an ordinary life. But George disagrees, and he tells her that she is not in the least bit ordinary. And on that, he and Bertha are absolutely in agreement. Over at the Van Rhijn household, Agnes, of course, is not pleased to hear that Marion will be attending Bertha's luncheon. She's even less pleased to know that she's still entertaining the likes of Mr. Rakes. As she said before, he's an adventurer, and the fact that he seems to somehow make his way through every ballroom in the city means that very soon, he won't need Marion anymore. He'll soon move on to more glittering prizes. Naturally, both Marion and Ada are appalled by this statement, but as Agnes herself always says, she is never wrong. Now, throughout these episodes, we see that Armstrong insists on having some kind of issue with Peggy. Now, whether that's just because of the color of her skin, or some type of internalized envy, or something else, we don't know. But thankfully, every time she attempts to bring up something negative about Peggy, she gets dismissed, including by Mrs. Bower and Bannister. Next, we see Larry and Gladys being invited to a doll's tea party by Mrs. Fish. It's quite the bizarre event because every guest must take a doll and then make sure that it has enough to eat and drink throughout the entire afternoon. Yeah, no. We also see Carrie Astor, aka Mrs. Astor's daughter, sitting in a corner, and she seems to be quite emotional about something. Larry introduces Carrie to his sister, and he excuses himself while they have a conversation. Carrie doesn't believe anyone can possibly understand what it's like to have such a difficult mother. Well, Gladys can absolutely relate. And in Carrie's case, the issue is a man who her mother doesn't believe is good enough for her. Once again, Gladys can absolutely relate. Over at the Russells, we see Bannister imparting his wisdom onto Church, who is clearly over this whole situation. And matters get worse when Bertha decides that Bannister should simply take over the entire luncheon. And she also sweetens the deal with $100. Now, considering that adjusted for inflation, she just handed Bannister $2,756, I think it's safe to say they have a deal. However, he comes up with one of the worst excuses imaginable to explain his absence from the Van Rhijn household. He must seek legal matters from a lawyer whose office hours are only from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. He also leaves Jack to serve luncheon in his place. Later, we see Peggy and Marion out on the town when they run into Larry of all people. And it has been a good minute since these two have seen each other. Larry lets Marion know that despite being a banker for his father, he's also interested in a career in architecture. He wants to train and even build his own practice. It's rather interesting, isn't it? Larry is part of a family that has more money than they could spend in one lifetime, yet he has career aspirations and he desires to build something for himself. Yet on the flip side, Tom? Yeah, I'm just gonna leave that one alone. Marion eventually sits down with Mrs. Chamberlain, and she has a lot of sympathy for her because she continues to be punished in perpetuity. And Mrs. Chamberlain reveals that everything that's being said is the truth. She broke the rules, and now she's paying the price. And Marion can relate because she feels like she's on the edge of breaking them herself. There's so much in question when it comes to Tom. So Mrs. Chamberlain decides to do her a favor and offer her home. She can meet Tom here, and they can take some time to talk things out and really get to know each other. And she's more than happy to do this for Marion because she's the first woman that has shown her any respect since her husband passed. Later, we see Gladys and Carrie socializing. Bertha enters the room, and Gladys presents Carrie to her. Bertha is delighted to meet her, and Carrie asks if Gladys could join her and a few friends at a luncheon at her mother's home next week. Bertha does mention that Gladys is not out yet, but when Carrie remarks on all the bells and whistles that could be arranged for her, Bertha seems to be in agreement, which is quite the shock to Gladys. Next, we see Armstrong attempting to broach the subject of Peggy's article to Agnes. Oh, but Agnes has a little surprise for her. She says, "Would this have anything to do with your prejudice against Miss Scott? Because you need to learn how to control that. Furthermore, if you continue to make trouble for her, I will be very angry. You have been warned." Oh well, another L for Armstrong. Marion arrives at Bertha's luncheon, and she's quite surprised to discover Bannister there. But we already know how Marion is, so his secret is safe with her. Mr. McAllister arrives, along with Mr. and Mrs. Fane and Tom. He compares the Russells' home to Tsarskoye Selo, also known as the summer home of Russian Empress Catherine the Great. And this palace was built in the 18th century to rival Versailles in France. Now, it's easy to see that as a compliment, but it could also be a backhanded one. I say that because some contemporaries regarded Catherine the Great as ostentatious and vulgar in regards to displaying wealth. Regardless of the meaning, the reference has clearly gone over Bertha's head. But thankfully, Mrs. Fane decides to clue her in. They then head into the dining room, where they are treated to quite the stunning display. Mr. McAllister is quite surprised to see hyacinths and lilacs at this time of the year. He says that next, She will make the blind see and the lame walk. Everyone is seated, and each of them discovers that they have a gift wrapped in their napkins with a ribbon. The women are given glamorous fans, while the men are given golden cigarette cases. And if their reactions are any indication, Bertha is quickly casting her spell on Mr. McAllister and her other guests. The same cannot be said of Jack as he attempts to serve Ada and Agnes their luncheon. It's very clear that he does not have a grasp on things, but thankfully, Ada and Agnes intend on remarking to Bannister that he did an excellent job, lest he think he was actually missed. Next, Agnes receives a letter from an unknown sender, and once she reads it, she's immediately incensed. So much so that she decides to literally march across the street, not caring what is in her way, almost being run over by a horse and carriage. She doesn't care. She is done. She makes her way inside, and she is clearly overwhelmed by the sheer size and spectacle of the house. She enters the dining room, and she is once again taken aback. I mean, the display of the luncheon is one thing, but there are all these people that she knows and are associated in one way or another, gathered together at Bertha's luncheon. And you can tell that the wheels are turning, like there's so much that she wants to say, but she doesn't know where to begin, and she's kind of outnumbered. So Aurora and Marion cover for her by saying that she came to pay her respects to Mr. McAllister. So Agnes decides to bow out gracefully and excuse herself. Oh, and as far as Bannister, heads have rolled for less. Next, we see Sweeney Todd and Mrs. Lovett. Excuse me. We see Turner and Oscar in the park. And up to no good, as usual. Turner informs him that George is vulnerable right now, and that any show of support will certainly get Oscar back into his good graces. And although she's thankful for the money that Oscar gives her for this information, it's also clear to Oscar that she's in this for revenge. And interestingly enough, it's Armstrong who catches a glimpse of them chatting outside on the street. Later that night, we see Armstrong attending to Agnes, and it's clear that the events of the day have distressed Agnes greatly. She realizes that she acted on impulse, and she believes that to act on impulse is to make oneself a hostage of ridicule. Then Armstrong reveals to Agnes what she saw between Turner and Oscar. Agnes is shocked and angered by this revelation, and she orders Armstrong out of her room. Lastly, although Bertha is excited and appreciative for the events of the day, George has hit yet another unexpected obstacle. It seems the man responsible for the axle installation has been found. His name is Dixon, and he's the head of the team that built the engine. And he is now telling everyone that it is George who gave him the order. And even worse, it appears that he has proof of it. And not just any proof. Written proof. All right, and that closes out episode 6, Heads Have Rolled for Less. I said it once before, I'll say it again. I'm really enjoying this series. I'm actually mad that I have to wait every single week to see what happens because, man, it just gets better and better every single time. And as always, please feel free to let me know your thoughts about this episode. How do you feel about Bertha? And how do you feel about her and George's dynamic? How do you feel about Bertha and Mr. McAllister and the luncheon? Was she wrong for borrowing Bannister? Was Bannister wrong for taking the money and not being loyal to Agnes? Is George wrong to be angry with Bertha, considering how she's handling her priorities as far as this whole society situation, versus George having to deal with this railroad accident and the fallout with that? And as far as Turner, what do you think her plan is? Like, what do you think she wants revenge for? And how do you think that she'll go about getting it? Please feel free to let me know down below. So, once again, this is D, Movie Man, signing off. And I'll see you with the movies.